Dear learners, welcome back to the second unit of the research methodology for tourism and hospitality management course designed for undergraduate, postgraduate and PhD scholars. In the first unit, we have seen the basics of research. We have seen the disciplinary nature of tourism and hospitality research and how it is aligned with other disciplinary areas. At the last, we discussed how to design your research proposal. So, in the second unit, we will be dealing in detail with the qualitative research techniques. This unit is divided into 5 modules, and this first module explains qualitative inquiry, the history and development of qualitative inquiry, the contribution of qualitative inquiry into the academic research, essential features, and we will end up with one of the approaches used in qualitative research, that is ethnography. I would like to recommend for reference material for you. The following books are widely used by researchers. The first one in this sequence is M.Q. Patton, who authored Qualitative Research and Evaluation Methods. This book provides a detailed description of qualitative research, different techniques used by researchers with specific examples. And the second book which I recommend is U-Flick, which is more simple and less voluminous. While you go through U-Flick's book on an introduction to qualitative research, it provides a brief and simple description on different type of qualitative researches. And the third book is more simple, and this is authored by John Creswell. It speaks about the qualitative research inquiry and 5 different research designs used by qualitative researchers. And the last book is treated to be one of the widely used reference source, authored by Denzin and Lincoln. And this is an edited book in which different contributors speaks in detail about different research approaches and the methods used for conducting qualitative research, and especially this book would be more useful for PhD scholars. So, let us enter into the topic. Qualitative researches deals with everyday life of people. It deals with experiences of people at a different context. A context is playing a vital role while we do qualitative research, and M.Q. Patton says the inquiry deals with documents or situations, experiences, and that leads to interpretation and meaning making process. So, dear learners, let us look the difference between quantitative research and qualitative research. In quantitative research, we normally go with theory, hypothesis, data collection, analysis, and summarizing the findings. But in terms of qualitative research, we observe a phenomena, or we observe collective experiences, or going into the details of social life, then come out with the specific interpretations. Let us see how qualitative researches emerged. The early history says Herodotus, a Greek philosopher who is also said to be the father of history, who extensively compiled the available information. Then in the 2nd century BC, Sextus Empiricus, who wrote on the cross-cultural survey of morality. You might be aware that in Western society, there was a confrontation between social life and the moral life. So, Sextus Empiricus tried to examine the society looking at their social and cultural life. Then we can see narrative and descriptive inquiries, and it continued, and till the 19th century, the description of the new places and the people, their cultures are described by the travelers who were in search of new land, and that also include the colonial period. There is some shape taking up. By 19th century, a change is happening and the inquiry is becoming more systematic in nature. And as an example, I can quote here, British Society, it published a manual in 1874 to collect the data systematically and how to conduct observation and interviews. So before we go into the chronological development of the qualitative researches, let me just give you some names that includes Herodotus, Aristotle, Marco Polo, Max Weber, Emily Durkheim, who were said to be like the profound scholars of different areas, which includes history, philosophy, anthropology or religious studies. In the later period, we find cultural anthropology, urban sociology and ecological anthropology. These different segments developed with researchers focusing on these areas. Some examples to quote: Franz Boas, William White, Gregory Bateson. And we divide the positivist approach dealt with deductive techniques that include hypothesis testing, as I said earlier. But the qualitative researchers were more observation based or narratives, building of narratives and interpretation focused. Researchers have a different view. Let us quickly see two schools of qualitative researchers developed in the Western countries. One is European school and the other one is American school. The initial period, 19th century, the qualitative research is more on description based, and slowly there were some changes happening and the nature of conducting the inquiry and the procedures, then the methodological aspects where researchers extensively worked on and come out with a specific mechanism by the end of 19th century. So this particular slide provide a glimpse on the development of these two schools, that is Chicago school and the second one is German school. So the early studies started with 19th century till the beginning of 20th century in Europe, and the later period 1970s, this particular period is called phase of import because the developments in American school were widely discussed in German speaking areas. For example, grounded theory and other procedural developments of qualitative research. And by 1970s and 80s, the development of methods which were widely debated and get standardized. And by the beginning of 1990s, researchers established qualitative research practices and the research journals publishing research articles using qualitative research methods were accepted among the scientific community. Here we have to also think about the contribution of Chicago school. Chicago school, you may have heard about Strauss, Corbin, who developed grounded theory approach in qualitative researches. So Denzin and Lincoln, who says 7 movements which shaped qualitative researches. The first movement is traditional period to World War, that is ethnography, and the second phase is modernist phase, which attempt to formalize qualitative researches. For example, Glaser, Strauss, Corbin, Miles, they were said to be the pioneers who developed specific mechanism to conduct qualitative researches. The third phase, Lincoln and Denzin says blood generation. This is up to 1980s. Here we find development of alternative paradigms, that is ethnomethodology, symbolic interaction, feminism, etc. In the mid 1980s, the process of displaying knowledge and findings, evaluation of research findings were the central topics. By 1990s, theories and narratives that fit specific context or local context gaining attention from the researchers. The seventh moment features establishment of qualitative research worldwide and journals showing interest to publish such researches. So learners, what we understand from this particular slide? We see that ethnographic approaches were widely popular among the researchers, and by 1950s, after 1950s, there were new methodologies and also development of new paradigms. Here we have to remember the names of Strauss, Corbin, Glaser, who were said to be the pioneers of developing grounded theory approach. And later we find a new paradigms or alternative paradigms, that is dealing with symbolic interactions, semiotics and feminist studies. The beginning of the millennium, qualitative researches become widely acceptable by the beginning of the new millennium. Journals which are focusing upon qualitative research techniques accepted research papers and highlighted the need of qualitative inquiries which addresses on specific context or localized context. So here what a qualitative researcher does? The qualitative researchers looks into the context, capture the meanings, try to interpret with a scientific lens and come out with a description based upon the context. So the sensitivity to context is important, and qualitative research deals with meaning making process. According to Patton, qualitative inquiry which contributes to development of meaning and how things work, it captures the stories of people and their perspectives, and it elucidates how systems function and the consequences of this, understanding the context in detail, identifying unanticipated consequences, or making comparisons to discover patterns. So let us look at it in a different way. In a simple way, let us take tourism and hospitality as an example. We can take different context where qualitative researchers can contribute. Say for example, cultural tourism. Cultural tourism which includes several elements. That includes the way people live, or the culinary practices, traditions, rituals, religious practices, social life and many more. So a qualitative researcher has to look cultural tourism in a holistic perspective and taking a particular context, maybe we can define it with a geographical limit, and going into the detail of development of a specific ritual or a tradition. I would like to take the example of Chhath Puja, which is widely celebrated in Bihar and adjacent states. So this tradition is followed by several generations. So a qualitative researcher can look into specific context. The context can be geographical, or it can be a section of people who speak a common language, for example Maithili or Bhojpuri. Then going into that particular time the festival is celebrated, observing everything minutely and try to capture the meanings from the experiences of the participants of Chhat Puja, so that the researcher can give a holistic meaning of development of a festival or development of a tradition which is rooted with the culture, which connect with the nature as well as our lifestyle. Qualitative researches also helps us to develop understanding on patterns, different social issues. If we can take the example of COVID-19. Tourist guides or tourist taxi operators, hoteliers, all segments which are directly connected with the tourism, they all suffered very badly during the time of COVID. So, the pattern that we understand is crisis. When crisis happens, tourism industry is one of the first industry which is suffering out of it. And the people who are directly dealing with the tourism, they become the victims of such kind of crises. Now, let us see the relevance of qualitative research. According to Flick, pluralization of the life worlds, or it studies the social relations or the rapid social changes. When we look into social relations or social changes, a positivist approach will not work here. A detailed investigation needs time and also have to go into the minute detail of the subject. So, qualitative researches can be the best alternative. The essential features of qualitative research according to Flick: number 1, appropriateness of the methods and theories. As you are aware, qualitative researches are most criticized one as well, because the subjectivity of the study findings, the appropriateness of the methods and theories is an important aspect of qualitative research to make it valid or acceptable. Number 2, the participants may be heterogeneous and they have different perspectives. So, if you go with a questionnaire and get the insight, in a quantitative study, the researcher collects the data with a questionnaire. Here, the questions and answers are already fixed. The participant has limited choice to find an answer. But in terms of a qualitative research, the diverse perspective of the participants are taken care of. The next aspect is reflexivity of the researcher. The researcher takes a non-biased stand. The interpretation should be not based on the bias or researcher's own experiences. And a variety of approaches and methods are available in qualitative research. To summarize, according to Flick, qualitative researches are interesting because it investigates in detail the social phenomena or the experiences of the people, and the people are from different backgrounds. Here the diversity and diverse perspectives can be addressed to qualitative researches, and there are different methods which suits to different contexts. So, qualitative researches can be one of the best possible alternative. So, one of the methods used in qualitative research is ethnographic research. Ethnography is the study of cultures. It is the study of people, their culture and interpretation of their perspectives. Culture explain perspective and behavior of a group of people and how these people behave within the group, and the researcher describes and interprets patterns, behaviors, beliefs, and it helps the researcher to identify subcultures. So, let us quickly see it with the lens of tourism and hospitality. We find ethnic communities. Ethnic communities are also a tourist attraction. So, communities living in hill areas or communities living in distant locations who are not exposed to the urban areas. So, they have their own customs. So, a researcher using ethnography visit the community, note down the cultural features and identify the shared values, the patterns of their life and come out with specific findings. So, this would be an easy example for you to understand ethnographic research. According to John Creswell, ethnography can be divided into 4 types. One is life history and second one is autoethnography. The third one is feminist ethnography and the fourth one is visual ethnography. Life history deals with study of the life of people. Let us take the example from tourism. Thomas Cook, you all are knowing who is Thomas Cook, who started tourism business in a formal way. So, a researcher who study the contribution of Thomas Cook, you can work out on the life history of Thomas Cook, how he started his travel business, how he developed the business beyond UK and how Thomas Cook became a brand in the corporate world. The second one is autoethnography. Autoethnography is study on self. An individual who undergoes some kind of experience and later brings out the narrative of these experiences, we can call autoethnography. As a teacher, I take my own example here. I travel to different places. So, when I visit different sites, what strikes into my mind? The beauty of the locations, the scenic attractions or the cultural features, how it helps me in developing an understanding of the place or how these experiences are useful in classrooms. So, collective experiences after 20 years of service life, it could be a matter of interesting inquiry. And the third one is visual ethnography. Visual ethnography is a study of photographs, videos or content in internet world and trying to understand the patterns of behavior. I just give you an example. Varanasi is known for the ghats, the riverfront area where the stones lead to the riverside is one of the major attraction of visitors. People who visit Banaras, they take photograph of the ghats. We also find graffiti on the walls of some buildings or the ghat side. So, we conducted a study on the pattern of these graffitis. International tourists, especially hippie kind of tourists or international tourists who spend a considerable time in the city, and some of them engage in this creating graffitis on the walls or the ghat side. So, what is the pattern emerging out of this graffiti? It looks like a modern art, but there is some messages which they want to communicate. This is what one example I can take from visual ethnography based upon photographs which we analyze systematically. And the last part is feminist ethnography. So, feminism is one of the emerging area, as you are all aware. Researchers study feminist ethnography which details upon the sufferings or the feelings, the depressed feeling of women and the role of women in the society is examined. So, we will go with the specific examples in the coming sessions. There are 2 types of ethnography which Thomas says. One is realist ethnography and the second one is critical ethnography. Realist ethnography deals with narratives, and these narratives are built upon the codes of the participants. Critical ethnography is coming out of critical understanding of a particular study or the context. Here we use advocacy groups or issues of power. So dear learners, what do you understand out of this particular description? First, ethnography is a study of culture, how people experience while they are in a group, and the second aspect is we can divide it into different areas that we have seen: life history, autoethnography, visual ethnography, feminist ethnography. Broadly, it can be divided into two. One is narrative and the second one is critical. And in the narrative, we are creating the description directly from the words spoken by the participant and interpret it in straight way. And the second way, that is critical, here we have to critically observe the way respondents answered or respondents behave based upon certain aspects, such as it can be issues of power or it can be issues of race, caste, etc. How to conduct ethnographic studies? Two methods are widely used by researchers. One is observation and the second one is interviews, that is in-depth interviews. The researcher study the context first, then observe the community according to the research question. The researcher can make field notes, then also think of conducting structured interviews or semi-structured interviews. So these structured interviews would be helpful in gaining insight of the participants. At the end, the information collected by the respondent, which is processed and analyzed, and after analysis, the results coming out of that research is interpreted in order to get a proper meaning out of it. So in a simple way, we can say that ethnographic researches, which gives us interesting outcomes, the pattern of behavior of people who live in a particular community or situations. I am taking an example of our modern day life. Partying is a very common or popular form of celebration among the youngsters. So, if you want to study the behavior of youth while they engage in partying, so let us see the context. Freshers party or farewell party, which we hear in college or universities. So these are occasions where youngsters, the newly admitted or the students who are going out of the institution, they share their views and they present their perspectives, they interact with the newcomers, or they show their emotions in a common platform. So how these freshers or farewell events, how it develop social understanding, how it develop social networks, it could be an interesting aspect of the study. So another point of view is the researcher immerses himself or herself with the context and that particular research problem. Then with a broad theoretical understanding, the research is conducted. So ultimately, making meaning out of the research interest is important in terms of the ethnographic research. So let us conclude here. What we learned in the beginning, we have seen the development of qualitative research, chronological as well as the subject wise. We have seen two schools of thoughts, that is European and American, and we have seen from the very basic understanding the description based researches changing its course or procedures more systematically and coming out of a specific meaning making process by 20th century. And we also find development of different paradigms, and these alternative paradigms gave enough scope for the progress of qualitative researches. At the end of this module, we saw ethnography as one of the techniques of qualitative research. Ethnography is used to study the culture or the individual's experiences in a community. And in the coming modules, we will go into the details of different techniques employed by researchers to conduct qualitative researches. I hope you had a good learning session. Thank you.